This interview is part of the SSCA Circumnavigators Summit, sharing experiences of members who circumnavigated. All engaged in this project are volunteers providing information solely for entertainment and education purposes. SSCA may edit and publish the interviews in the SSCA Circumnavigation Summit in audio and video formats to benefit its membership and as a recruiting tool. SSCA and participants assume no responsibility for the accuracy or validity of information shared in these interviews. Opinions stated do not necessarily reflect those of the Seven Sea Cruising Association.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the SSCA Circumnavigators Summit. My name is Jackie Lee from Trimaran Sloopmoosh, and I have the privilege to interview some of these special members who have completed a circumnavigation. Many volunteers at SSCA are working hard to make the organization new and fresh and relevant to our members. So we hope you will enjoy this new series. Many sailors wonder what it takes to make a circumnavigation and whether they could do it. We will be interviewing SSCA members who did it. Believe it or not, over 100 members sailed around the world just in between the period between 2001 and 2019. And bravo to them. You will have a chance to hear many varied types of sailors. Solo sailors, families, 2 to 3 year voyages, 20 plus years, international members, former SSCA board members, motor vessel owners, celebrities, and regular sailors just like us. So, without further ado, let's get right to the interview. Okay, this is going to be a fun interview today. We'll be talking with Rich Crowell and Jan Schwab of Slipaway, and they are now in Cincinnati, Ohio. During our pre-call communications with Jan, we discovered that she and Luke and I worked for the same resort hotel chain in the same era and just missed meeting each other, and that we have friends in common. And the friends in common brought us a Skipper Key puppy from Australia to have on our boat, and they also were there to celebrate Slipaway's finish of their circumnavigation. So you see how the world of cruisers and the world in general can be small. So thank you very much for being with us today, Rich and Jan.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. We're having a lot of fun preparing for this and hopefully sharing some of our experiences.
Okay. And how are you today, Jan?
Doing really well. Just trying to stay warm because it's a little chilly here today, but hopefully it'll warm up in the afternoon. It's about 2 or 3 Celsius this morning, which is a little chilly for the end of March, but we've had some really beautiful days with it up in the mid 20 Celsius, upper 70s Fahrenheit. So we've had some really nice days. It's just this is springtime. And the blooms on the trees are beautiful, so we're enjoying that.
Great. So by the miracle of technology, we're talking to each other, and we're in Sabang, Indonesia, with the regular temperatures around 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 Celsius. Can you tell us briefly each of your backgrounds and how you got into sailing?
Okay, I'll start with this. It's kind of weird because I got into it a lot later than a lot of people did. I grew up on an apple orchard in the Midwest, and during my business career, I was a financial officer in real estate. So none of that contributed at all to my sailing. My career took me to Los Angeles, and there but just based on a quirk, I ended up buying a Catalina 27 from a friend of mine, but I didn't know how to sail it. So I put it in a marina, and then that's where I met Jan. So she's actually the one that taught me how to sail, and that's kind of how I got to it.
And for me, I grew up in Cincinnati, and although we didn't have an ocean here, we have a nice river, and I learned how to water ski at a very young age. And in 1986, I went to work for Club Med as a water ski GO, and I worked there for a couple of years. And during my time there, I learned to sail, and I actually, in one of my seasons, started teaching sailing because they needed some help on the sailing team. And then after Club Med, I moved to Los Angeles. I joined a sailing club. I did some very casual racing as I was crew on a boat. And I eventually bought a small boat with a friend, a McGregor 25, and we day sailed that boat on the Santa Monica Bay. And that's when I met Rich on the boat dock in Los Angeles.
Okay, that's great. That's a good story. And when did you get your first boat together and start sailing as a cruising plan?
I guess we first started sailing together on our small boats, and then we had no thoughts about a circumnavigation or anything. But then as things evolved, and we were looking to do a charter in the Caribbean with some friends, and Jan was doing a lot of research on that and discovered there were all these people out there in their own boats running charters. And so she floated that idea, and that just kind of evolved into going cruising. I had only known of one person that did that in my past, and I didn't even remember it at the time. So it just kind of evolved for us.
And I'll just add to that. We met in 1996, and so that's when we first started sailing together. And we sailed together on Santa Monica Bay, which was basically the extent of our initial sailing. I guess until 2001 when we bought Slipaway. So we had two boats when we first met, and then when we got married in '99, and we sold my McGregor 25. And my partner and her husband, my partner on my McGregor, she and her husband became our partners on his Catalina 27. And then when we bought Slipaway, they kept the Catalina 27 and continued to sail it.
Okay. All right. So when did you buy Slipaway?
We bought Slipaway in October of 2001.
Okay. And then when you bought her, did you plan then to circumnavigate it, or you had it bouncing around in your mind?
Yeah, we had it bouncing around in our mind. It was funny because Rich initially said, let's sail around the world. And I was like, no way. I'm not crossing oceans because, when I did these like Wednesday night beer can races in Marina del Rey, and, and I was single, and I, afterwards I would go back to the yacht club, and you meet these guys, and they were all talking about, oh yeah, I sailed across the South Pacific, and, I got knocked down and turned over, and I'd hear all these horror stories, and I was like, there's no way I'm crossing oceans. But then, actually, when we joined the Seven Seas Cruising Association, and I started reading all these stories about other people who were sailing to the South Pacific and having lovely sails, and I was like, well, wait a minute, if these people can do this, I can do it too. And so that really kind of helped me get over my fears of crossing oceans.
Okay, great. Yeah, sometimes those guys in the bars, they want to be the macho guys, and they're going to impress you by telling you all the horrors that they lived through and survived. So glad you got a different idea. Okay, so let's see. Slipaway is what kind of a boat, and did you buy it with the idea of circumnavigating, or why did you buy that particular boat?
Yeah, we bought it with an idea of cruising and kind of a back idea about circumnavigating. The boat is a 1978 Islander Freeport 41. It's a catch rig, full keel boat. We chose it largely because it's an older, heavy boat, like the full keel part of it, and it's also, that model is rather beamy, so it was comfortable living aboard, and both comfortable on passages and comfortable at anchor. It was not any speed demon or anything. We generally planned our passages at about 5.5 knots, and usually went a little faster, but it was not a speed demon. It was just a more comfortable, heavy boat.
Okay. Well, 5.5 knots is nothing to sneeze at, that's for sure. And that's good. It's true that some of those boats that were built back then, when the fiberglass was much more sturdy and everything, because they weren't sure that fiberglass was going to hold up, so they put a lot more on it. And usually those older boats don't have problems with the osmosis. Okay, so now when you finally said, okay, we're kind of on the way, what was the general route that you took?
Okay, so first of all, we cruised for a total of 16 and a half years, but our actual circumnavigation was just under 10 years. So we first, when we left Los Angeles, we sailed south from there, and we cruised the west coast of Mexico and Central America. We went through, we left Los Angeles in 2003. And so then we spent the next 4 years in Mexico and Central America, and in 2007 we went through the Panama Canal into the Caribbean. And part of the reasons for doing that was just we felt like we wanted to gain more ocean experience. And the other part too was that we wanted to go see the east coast of the U.S., and we also have family on the east coast. So we spent some time, spent the next 3 years actually in the Western Caribbean. On the east coast of the U.S., we sailed up to Maine, and so up and down the east coast. And then we also, when we came back down through the Western Caribbean, we went down to Cartagena, Colombia. Then we went back through the Panama Canal in 2010, and we sailed first to, of course, to the Galapagos and French Polynesia, and through the South Pacific. We stopped at Saguaro Atoll, American Samoa, Niue, Tonga. We went down to Fiji, down to New Zealand, then back up to Fiji, back to New Zealand, Vanuatu, Australia, then through Indonesia, and on to Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. And then when we crossed the Indian Ocean, we chose to do the southern route. So we came back down to the Sunda Straits in Indonesia and started our Indian Ocean crossing there. We went to Cocos Keeling, Rodrigue, Mauritius, Reunion, then Madagascar, then on to South Africa, around the bottom of South Africa. And then we, from South Africa, we sailed to St. Helena. And from St. Helena, we had decided we were ready to go home. So we did a 35-day passage from St. Helena to the Bahamas. We spent a month in the Bahamas, and then we headed back to Florida, where we crossed our outbound track and completed our circumnavigation.
Okay, wow, from St. Helena all the way to the Bahamas. That was a big voyage. Okay, and you did it, Jan, see? After all that time, you did the big passage.
Oh. Yeah, and the funny thing is that in the end, I really enjoyed the ocean passages much more than my husband did. So it was funny because I actually really kind of liked the ocean passages.
I liked them when they were comfortable. didn't particularly like them when they were not. But it was a small price to pay for the things that we got to see.
Right. Great. Okay. That sounds like it was a very adventurous and fun time for you. All right. You did mention about joining SSCA, and it sounded like fairly early on. When did you hear about SSCA, and why did you decide to join?
Well, actually, a woman that I had worked with had quit her job and had gone cruising in the Caribbean with her husband. And at that time, I had no idea what cruising was. I just know she left and went off on a sailboat somewhere. Knew nothing about it. But then I had kept in contact with her, and when we were thinking about this, she suggested that I look into the SSCA, and so I did. When I'm ignorant of things, my defense is to read everything I could. So I joined SSCA and started reading the monthly bulletins from cover to cover. It was just, it was wonderful information, particularly when you don't know anything. And then once we bought our boat in Puerto Vallarta and then brought it up to Los Angeles and did a year's worth of refit there. And of course, again, didn't know anything about equipment or anything. And I think it was the 2002 equipment survey. I got a copy of that, and that was unbelievably helpful for me in selecting equipment and seeing what other people thought of equipment that was actually in use and whether it worked or didn't work. So we did get in early on and have been members ever since.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's right. Something that someone hasn't mentioned yet was the equipment survey, and that is a very, very useful thing, especially, like you say, to get recommendations from people that are really out there doing it. Do you have any other story about an SSCA or any kind of thing to do with SSCA that you would like to share with us?
Well, there's one other than just the value of the bulletins and the equipment survey. We did have one very positive experience when we were on our passage from Bora Bora to Saguaro Atoll. We were right about in the middle, and it was right at the change of watch at midnight, because all these bad things happen at midnight. We broke a chain plate. Fortunately, the rig didn't come down, and I was able to secure it. But then, of course, you're worried about all the other chain plates and what else is going to go wrong, as well as needing to fix it. So we diverted to American Samoa. Well, we didn't divert. We actually went to Saguaro and then went on to American Samoa, where there was a cruising station host there. Very interesting guy, an older retired gentleman, probably the busiest retired guy I've ever met. He was not a sailor, but he had become a cruising station host, and he was a tremendous help for us. He picked me up at the quay there and took me to a friend of his that had a commercial gas company, had a big slab of stainless steel out back, had a laser cutter. Long story short, he made 9 new chain plates for me, and it cost me 2 cases of Coors Light beer to pay him for it.
Okay, I love it. Yes, those are the kinds of stories that we have about SSCAers and sailors in general. I love that story, Rich. That's great. Okay, let's move on a little to a different subject. Weather. So, did you have any bad weather that you encountered, or what was your strategies for getting weather forecasts and trying to avoid bad weather?
Well, when it comes to weather, I don't know about anyone else, but it has always been about 15, 20 knots and off our quarter.
Yeah, yeah. But, well, for the most part, we feel very lucky. We we managed to avoid really, really bad weather. And I think for the most part it's possible to avoid bad weather, but you just never know what's going to pop up out there. Sometimes I think we had really overworked guardian angels out there, but anyway, our strategies were, of course, paying attention to the seasons. We were not in hurricane zones when it was hurricane season. We used the Sail Dock service and downloaded grid files. We used windy. We used passage weather for a little bit, and whenever possible, we took advantage of local knowledge, especially on passages to and from New Zealand and around South Africa. We did have two kind of bad weather experiences. One of them was in Cape May, New Jersey at anchor, where it was blowing 50 knots, and we were at anchor, and the holding was not very good there, and we dragged a couple times, but we eventually put out all of our chain and our anchor and stayed put, and fortunately no damage to the boat. And the other bad weather experience we had was along the coast of Mozambique. We were sailing towards South Africa, and there was a system that was coming up that was forecast to be about 20 knots, and we saw over 40, which was a little bit scary, but overall, it was a very short squall that went through, I guess you would call it, or system. But overall, we were extremely lucky. And I think my best advice would be to take advantage of local knowledge and be very patient. And
patience is key to it, because you don't want to push.
Right. And the other thing is be careful about scheduling guests. Sometimes if you have a long passage to do before guests are coming, you may not be able to make it. So those were, I guess, the words of wisdom that I could offer.
That makes a lot of sense. I think your point about local knowledge is quite good, because we remember somewhere in Tonga, what do they call it, the class of puddle jumpers of that year or whatever, and they were all getting together, and when October, and when do we go to New Zealand, and what does Bob McDavitt say, and on and on and on and on, and they were they were all panicked about it, and then one or two left, and everybody was going, but they're leaving, maybe we should leave too. And the people that did like 13 different passages from New Zealand to up to the islands and back every year, they were kind of chuckling and saying, well, we usually wait till around November, December. And we thought to ourselves, well, yeah, why don't people ask those people that do the 13 different passages year after year, instead of all following each other? So I think that's great advice. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's true. And I remember we were at Minerva Reef on our way down to New Zealand from Tonga, and it's funny because all these people are leaving because there were a group of us there, and you're kind of second guessing yourself. And we finally just said, we're going to wait. And we waited, and they had much nastier conditions than we did. And there was also a local cruiser who had made that passage, a local guy from New Zealand, and he had written, I think he'd written an article in SSCA, and so we had that article, and his advice was to head west to a certain lat long and then turn south, and we followed his advice, and we had a great passage.
Okay, that's a great story. I like that a lot. All right, so good. Remember that, folks. Local knowledge. Talk to the experts. All right, let's go to communications. What forms of communications did you use, and was there an evolution of communications, and what methods did you really like?
So, for communications, And they evolved tremendously because we started cruising in 2003. So, in 2003 there were no smartphones or tablets, and we got weather by downloading grid files through our single sideband radio. And the SSB was also really a great communication tool for keeping in touch with other boats on passage. But we eventually did buy a sat phone, which made downloading weather and email much easier. But I think most folks now use the Iridium Go for communications. I can't really comment on that because we didn't have one, except that people really seem to love it. And I think if we had not been wrapping up our circumnavigation, we probably would have bought one. But it was... it's just amazing the information that's available to you now when you're out there, and the ability to download your the weather information. And I think that's about all I can really say about the communications. Rich wanted to add something too.
Yeah, I wanted to add a quick comment about single sideband radios because as new people are listening to this. When we initially started cruising, the single sideband was a wonderful tool for gathering information and keeping in touch with people. And it's much like a conference call or a party line, because you got to hear things from all sorts of people, even if you weren't talking directly to them. You could listen to other conversations. It seems that the cruising world has evolved to using less and less of the single sidebands as the smartphones have gotten popular. But I really still think there's a big advantage to having a single sideband radio. The smartphones don't yet work out in the middle of the ocean. If you're on a passage with a group of people, you can still keep in touch with them via a single sideband, and it's a wonderful community building tool. So I would think seriously about spending the money to install a single sideband, even though they don't seem to be quite as popular with the newer cruisers as they were when we started.
Okay, yes, thank you. You're not the only one to voice that opinion about the SSB radio. They haven't died out yet. And it's true that when you are on those radio nets or you have the skeds, people that are ahead of you can tell you information about what they're encountering, and it's just nice to keep in touch with people and say hi and we're okay and all that kind of things. And I think also, like you have indicated a little bit, people seem to lose this communication with other people, especially to develop friendships and that sort of thing, and they tend to look it up on Google instead of talking with people nowadays. So great, thanks a lot for that opinion, and as I say, you're not alone in that opinion. All right. Now a subject that a lot of people, I'm sure, have asked you about is, did you have any encounters with piracy, or did you have any burglary or thievery, any kind of stories about security, and how did you deal with security?
We have a few stories. We never had an encounter with piracy. We kept our ear to the ground and our eye to what you could read, and we basically stayed away from areas that were known to be a little more dicey. For example, Venezuela used to be a nice cruising area. We never went there. The southern Philippines, when we were in that part of the world, were not a safe place to go. We chose not to go through the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea. We wanted to see South Africa anyway, but regardless, we would not have gone through the Red Sea at the time we were there. So the first thing we did was just pay attention to what parts of the world are a little more dicey. And we didn't get that from any single source. We would read what the U.S. State Department said, but we'd also keep our ear to the ground with other cruisers and what people were experiencing. That network is very rich with information. So that's essentially what we did as a foundation for security. We were robbed twice in the 16 years we were out. Neither time were we on the boat. Once was in Mexico during the Easter holiday festivities. We were on someone else's boat having sundowners, and some people just opportunistically went down the starboard side of our boat and took everything that was loose off of it, and I guess they needed it more than we did. The other time was when we were in Cartagena. We left the boat in a boatyard on the hard, and when we came back, we discovered that it had been robbed. Someone had gotten inside it and had stolen everything loose, and so that turned out to be a security guard at the boatyard. But other than that, we didn't really have any issues. We weren't particularly paranoid. I didn't have an easy way to lock us inside the boat, so most nights we never even locked the boat up when we were at anchor. And essentially, we didn't live our life paranoid because we found people around the world to be genuinely nice and welcoming and honest.
Yes, I agree with that. It's pretty rare, and yes, it's very unfortunate for anyone who does have the misfortune to fall into a piracy situation, but good advice to say, first of all, find out what the newest hotspots or the old hotspots, and looking at resources like Noonsite to see what they have to say about security during the time that you're going to be going in certain areas. I think that's a big major part of it. And yes, the thievery thing, it sounds like us too. We're having sundowners with our guard dog on board who never barked. So, but yeah, some thievery, and you think, oh gosh, I've lost this and I've lost that, but at least you didn't lose your life, or you didn't lose anything very terrible. So, okay, thank you for those ideas and those stories, so people can see that most of all, people around the world are pretty honest, and I must say that us sailors feel much, much safer than people do in a lot of the cities. Okay.
That's very true.
Yeah. All right. Another thing that I'm sure is curious in people's minds is, how did you sustain yourself financially? How did you finance yourself around the world?
So before we went cruising, I had always had a love of travel, and so I had a tendency to spend more money on travel than on other things. So I was also kind of a saver, and I saved my money because I actually did want to kind of retire early and go traveling. So we did, we had a nice savings, a nice nest egg when we decided to take off. But we sold our house and our cars and pretty much, everything, because we didn't feel that we could afford to have a house on land as well as our boat. So our boat was our home for actually, I think, 18 years, something like that. But especially in our first years, we lived very frugally. It was really easy to live pretty cheap in Mexico and Central America, and we needed to do that too, because we also were pretty young when we started out. I was 45 and Rich was 54 when we left Los Angeles. So, but then when Rich turned 62, he started getting Social Security. And having that income was just like, oh my gosh, we actually have a paycheck every month. That was really nice. In terms of others, we were aware of, folks just did things all different ways to figure out how they could afford it. Some folks left their boats in places and went back to their home countries to work for a while and replenish the kitty. Some were able to work remotely. That's becoming more popular now than it was, of course, when we first started out. And, some folks were able to work along the way. They maybe had skills that they needed in New Zealand or Australia, or there were teachers who, got jobs in Malaysia or whatever. So there was really a mix of ways to make it affordable. But for us, we did manage to live off of our savings, and we had a very good investment advisor who helped us with putting our money in places that would earn us, a good return on our money.
Okay. Good advice. I was going to say, Jan, on a geo salary, you don't go very far, but it's true that it's all in your priorities, and I find that if you're careful, living on a boat in some ways can be a lot less expensive than living on land, where you have to pay your electric bills and the water and insurance on your car and those kinds of things. So, okay, that's good to know. All right.
And I'll just add one other thing too, that we had a lot of support from family and friends in terms of, when we came back to the States to visit, we could always stay with family, and we had friends in Los Angeles who were just wonderful to us. They always told us, mi casa es su casa, and always welcomed us. So, especially when we were in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia, they would, let us stay at their house and have all of our boat gear and parts shipped to their house. And, we'd fly into LA. That'd be our last stop on our way back to the boat. And we'd, pack up all of our gear and go. And so, just having the home support from family and friends was incredibly helpful to us too.
Okay, great. Yes, we agree there. You meet some people and you find out the goodness in people's hearts a lot when you say, oh, can we send all our parts to you? And they put it in their garage, and yeah, it's fine. It's fun. So that's good. All right. Looking back at the voyage with hindsight, is there something that you would have done differently?
Yeah, there's really not much comes to mind because I'm older than Jan, maybe going a little faster, but not by a lot. I can't imagine what I would have chosen to give up. We did spend over 2 years in Southeast Asia. A lot of that was related to refitting our boat. It was still a good experience, but I don't know that I needed to spend that long there. But otherwise, I don't have anything that I would really do differently. I don't know about you.
And my comments are the same too. I can't really think of anything that we would change. We went very slowly on our circumnavigation. Obviously, our took us 10 years to sail to complete a circle, and we cruised for 17 or 16 years. So, but even at our speed, we sometimes wish we could have stayed longer in certain places. Yeah. There was so much that we saw and enjoyed. So, I just can't. Looking back, I can't think of anything that we would change.
Okay, that's perfect. I think that's a wonderful answer. That that you did it right. And you don't have any regrets. Do you have any story that is like a highlight, the big highlight of your voyage, or a couple different highlights?
Oh, one of mine that it's I guess just the few special memories that get implanted. One was, initially when we were doing our Pacific crossing and going from the Galapagos to French Polynesia, we went into the Marquesas and we made landfall at Fatu Hiva, and the Bay of Virgins in Fatu Hiva is still the most stunning anchorage I have been in all 16 years. It is unbelievably gorgeous there. That's just a wonderful memory that I will never forget. Another is I'm very interested in flora and fauna on land, and Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean was it wasn't a beautiful anchorage like Fatu Hiva was, but it too on land the topography was just stunningly beautiful. So those are the two places on land, and as far as we're pretty keen divers, and so the diving throughout the South Pacific was wonderful, but it was also spectacular in Fiji and Vanuatu and in Indonesia in Komodo National Park. We did a lot of diving in those areas, and it was really wonderful.
And I'll just add to that too. Just our whole Indian Ocean crossing, it was toward the end, and we thought, we've seen so much, but it was like every day there was still something new and interesting to see. And Madagascar, the humpback whales, the lemurs, these were all new experiences for us. And then we left South Africa was just incredible. But then we leave there and we go to St. Helena and we swam with whale sharks. And we've been chasing whale sharks for forever, and we'd never seen them. And we finally in St. Helena got to swim with whale sharks. So, even in our last year of sailing, there were still so many new experiences that were just really very special.
Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah, I enjoy that a lot, and I think that's going to be an inspiration for people to get on their boat and set sail. So, great. And now that you've done your circumnavigation, okay, now you're back in Cincinnati, Ohio, where the river is. Are you still sailing, or what are you doing now, and what are your future plans?
Well, we're no longer sailing. We took advantage this winter. We don't really like cold weather, so we left Cincinnati and spent a good part of the winter in Florida. And we had some friends down there with a 53-foot motor yacht, and we helped them bring it up. We first helped them take it from Daytona Beach down to Fort Lauderdale, and then a few months later helped them bring it from Key West up to Fort Myers. So we got to play around on other people's boat, which was really nice because we didn't have to fix anything if it broke, which was fun. But we're not really sailing anymore. We're getting adjusted to living on land, and we still, as long as we're physically able, we still really want to travel, but more by airplane and on land.
And I'll just add a little bit too. We did sell Slipaway. She sold much more quickly than we expected, and so we completed our circumnavigation in May of 2019, and in July, 2 months later, she was sold and had new owners. So
wow.
So we kind of were a little bit at a loss because she'd been our home for over 17 years. And
it was kind of like now what?
Yeah, really, we felt like the fish at the end of the Finding Nemo movie, going now what, But we have a good opportunity to kind of have a temporary home base here in Cincinnati, and our intention is to really have it only be kind of part time, and we still want to travel. Of course, that's all been upended by the whole coronavirus thing right now, but hopefully that won't last forever, and we can get back to that. There are so many, it was like the circumnavigation just kind of whetted our appetites, and we still have all these places that we want to go and see. And so that is our goal at the moment, is to be able to just kind of have a temporary part-time home base that we can always come back to when we want to, but go out and continue to see the world.
Okay, yes, I think the travel bug is in your blood. So That's great. I mean, there's plenty to see that's not near the ocean. So good for you. Good on you, as they say in Australia. Great, and good luck in your travels, whatever travels that you do. So now that we're kind of wrapping up, do you have any other subject that you would like to bring up to people that we haven't talked about? Anything that you would like to say to our listeners?
Yeah, there are a couple of items that we haven't mentioned, and one is just a bit of a reality check for anyone listening to this and thinking about going cruising. Don't jump into this thinking that it's going to be all cocktails at sunset. It's actually one of the most wonderful things we have ever done, and something we have zero regrets about. But don't minimize the fact that it's hard work. There are a lot of boat repairs that you'll need to do. You'll need to know or learn a lot about your boat, because you're the only one there to fix it lots of times. So don't jump into this naive and thinking that it's all going to be fun and games. It's hard work, but that hard work is well worth it. That's one comment. The other thing you don't typically read about, that for me was one of the big surprises, and probably in the top one or two things about the cruising life, is the cruising community that you meet. We have made the deepest friendships, the most friendships of anything I've done in my life, and we now have friends all over the world that we can go visit, that we keep in contact with. That is probably one of the richest things about cruising that you don't really read about a lot. This whole experience for us was actually a life-changing experience, because we had the good fortune to live for months at a time in other cultures, see how other people live, and it made us much more worldly and much more appreciative of all the wonderful things that we have just because of the luck of where we were born. So it's really worthwhile. The last comment I'd make in terms of advice is go before you get too old. If you wait till you retire at 65, you're not going to be able to go very long, because after 65, things get more and more difficult. And as I said earlier, it's a demanding lifestyle, and physically demanding as well. One other thing I wanted to comment on was healthcare when you're out cruising. As Americans, we were concerned about that before we left, because we really didn't know anything about healthcare around the world. What we found was very good. We found healthcare to be in other parts of the world to be excellent, and also much cheaper than it is in the United States. Jan did find an international citizens policy, so we did have insurance, but it had a high deductible, about $5,000 as I remember, and it also required us to be out of the United States for 6 months out of the year, and which was not a problem for us. But when we first got to Mexico, we found prescription medications to be much cheaper. For example, hypertension medication that I was paying $125 for, this was 20 years ago in the U.S., was $25 in Mexico, and I could buy it over the counter. And generally that was true in most places other than New Zealand and Australia, where they were a little bit more like the United States in terms of restrictions to medications. But most of the other places in the world, I could buy my medication over the counter. I also had the good fortune or misfortune of experiencing surgery in a few places. I had hernia surgery in Panama and another one in Fiji. I had rotator cuff repair done in Singapore. Singapore is the only place that was near the United States in price. All the rest of it, we never ever met our deductible. So I found healthcare to be excellent around the world, and it's not something that if I were leaving now, I would worry about.
Okay, Rich, thanks for that reflection. And I'm sure that is something that many American cruisers especially think about, because we always think, oh my God, we've got the best, world's best doctors and healthcare and all that. And we know that if we go anywhere else, it'll never be as good. That's a very good observation that you had, and I think if people take that into consideration, then they won't worry so much about having a high deductible. Maybe they will feel better to take an insurance, like a traveler's insurance, and that sort of thing. But they wouldn't be so worried about not finding good health care. So that's a good reflection. Thanks for that.
Yeah, after a few years out, we found ourselves more nervous when we came back to the United States that we would get sick or injured or something, because it was so much more expensive back here. And that was kind of a big deal for us. We spent a lot of money before we left on dental work and stuff that we could have gotten much cheaper if we'd have waited.
Yeah, and in fact now, in Southeast Asia especially, a big part of their income is they do what they call medical tourism, where it costs less we have a friend from Belgium, it cost her less to come to Thailand, stay in a hotel, and get implants, and stay around and go on tours and things while the different parts were healing, so she could get her implants done, and it cost her less than what it would have cost in Belgium to have a vacation, an implant vacation.
Yeah, that's very true. And we also spent a good bit of time in Malaysia and did a lot of things, just of healthcare related things in Penang, getting physicals and various things like that, and it was just excellent and very affordable.
And the only thing I would add to that too, I would just like to add also that one of the things that I would recommend for people is that if you are out there doing this, keep a diary or a journal. We actually had a website, and our friends and family love to read our website, believe it or not. I was actually kind of shocked. I mean, some people didn't. Some people weren't really all that interested. Some people just like to look at the pictures, and other people read every single word that we wrote. And they were always telling us that they live vicariously through us. But the other good reason for keeping a diary or journal or a website or a blog is to so that you can go back and also recall places that you went. Like sometimes we'll be talking about something, we're like, oh yeah, remember that happened? What was the name of that anchorage? And we can't remember it, but yet I can go to our website and I can find it. And I'm really, really glad we have that record of our travels.
Okay, I think all of that is great advice for people. I think it's something valuable. Yeah, I think what you said about people you meet is absolutely true, and it's great to have those memories and things to go back to. And we appreciate your opinions and your advice to us and to the listeners. Would you like to share your website address with us?
Yes, our website is still up, and it's actually not quite finished yet. I'm still working on a couple of pages, but the website address is www.slipaway.net.
You're still working on it, so that way you're still living your circumnavigation vicariously and remembering all of those things. Jan. And we just thank you and Rich for all your contribution that you've done on this call. It's enriched a lot of people and their knowledge base, and it's been fun talking to you, and it's great to hear your experiences and that you're so enthusiastic about your trip and that you wouldn't really change anything. And we so appreciate your contributing to the Circumnavigators Summit. Thank you very much.
It was our pleasure. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
If you enjoy this interview, make sure to listen to our other guests in the series, subscribe to SSCA YouTube channel, access the MP3 audio recording on SSCA website. Get the scoop on the latest SSCA activities and benefits, read the latest Cruiser Bulletin, participate in the forum and Facebook group, and please promote our organization to who you think might benefit.